episode number 46.
When I had my near-death experiences, I didn't exit consciousness. I entered consciousness of a different form.
The last 5 days of my mom's life, we'd have Ringo jump onto the bed, and he would nestle to her, and I know she could feel him. We'd actually place her hand on his fur.
You know, you learn about cultures and you learn about people, and especially talking to the older generation, you learn about what it was like for them 60, 70 years ago, and that's just an eye-opening experience that I don't know where I would have found that if I wasn't in the milk truck.
Why didn't Yoko step in and say this isn't what he wanted?
Well, she did it.
She's the one who had him cremated.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh, Yoko.
Yeah, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to stay as vague as possible.
Okay,
so.
good. Let me know if you hear a drone over your house. Hi, I'm Brant Huddleston, host of Dance Past Sunset, and today's show is going to be a little bit different. In the past, I've always interviewed some kind of expert, and that's been great. We learn a lot from experts. But today, we're going right down to where the rubber meets the road and talk with a man who walked the caregiving talk. Dale Gyongyos left his home in North Carolina and traveled cross-country to Arizona, where he and his brother cared for their 95-year-old mother until her passing. Now, I want to read you something one of Dale's friends wrote me when she heard this show was coming. She said, quote, "As caregivers, we are lost so many times, and we struggle. One hears about dealing with aging parents, but experiencing it so hard. Thank you for choosing Dale, the perfect person with the perfect heart, to share his story in an articulate, compassionate, and honest way." Unquote. That's the story you are about to hear, folks. Because Dale and I are such good friends, like brothers even, our conversation is about as intimate as it gets, and you are invited to listen in as I talk with the amazing Dale Gyongyos. I'm happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here, Brant. This is fun.
It is. And what a pleasure to have you, because I respect you and know you from years and years past. So, yeah, let's start by telling where we are. So we're here at a friend's house.
Yes.
Mr. Dan Campbell, who is a fairly well-known artist in the Raleigh Triangle.
And growing.
Yes, and in the next room painting.
Yes.
While you and I catch up. But we caught up yesterday with a little blues music at one of the local taverns.
Really great.
Which was fun.
A lot of fun.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So before we get into the experience you had with your mom.
Yes.
You have to prove your credentials as a boomer.
Aha. Do you need dates and times?
I do. I want to know what year you were born and where.
I was born in 1951 in Cleveland, Ohio.
You're a boomer. Okay.
I am.
You're qualified.
Certified.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And I know about your experience as an artist, but tell me a little bit about that. You did stained glass art, but you did other things too. So tell me.
Yes. For 30 plus years, I was an art glass designer and craftsman. And I had my own business. I was in partnerships. I represented larger studios in different parts of the United States with church interiors. Now, primarily for the last 6 years, I'm a photographer, which I picked up photographing stained glass in the early days, which is a tricky medium. And now it's a passion and a love, and I don't have a specific genre. I'll shoot whatever fancies my eye.
But we came a long way from our vocations of origin. Mine as an engineer, yours as a stained glass designer, and we ended up jockeying cars together for Mr. Campbell, who's painting next door.
Yes.
How did that happen?
That's an excellent question. And if we could only bring him into the conversation, we might see some light on that topic.
Yeah. But we really were. That's how you and I met.
Yes, it is. Shuttling vehicles, buying cars.
Dan was running a car dealership here in Cary, And he would find cars in Timbuktu, and then he would send the likes of us up there to get them.
Yeah.
And pay us not very well.
Yeah, and we thought it was good work, too.
We were glad to have it at the time. But we were talking last night about how one time we were up in D.C. picking up a couple of cars when the earthquake hit.
Yes.
And we thought it was the cars were junk because the hoods were flopping around.
What's going on here right now?
This is the worst lemon Dan has ever bought. It's jumping up and down like a jackrabbit. It turned out it was the earthquake.
Yeah. What a day that was.
That was. I remember that. Put cracks in the Washington Monument.
Did it really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it did. Okay, so then I kind of lost track of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew from Facebook that you were out in the desert somewhere, Arizona,
Yes.
I guess, but I didn't quite know why. And it wasn't until just a few weeks ago that we caught up again by phone and you told me the story. And I said, I have to have you on the show.
Oh, okay.
Because it's amazing. It's an amazing story.
I could not be more pleased to be here.
Yeah. Well, take me from kind of the moment that you decided you needed to leave North Carolina and travel west.
Okay.
What was going on?
I'll preface by saying I'm just one of perhaps millions of people across this country that have made decisions like the one I did and left what they were up to tend to a loved one.
Yes.
I'm just one.
Yeah.
I went to see my mother in Mesa, to put my pulse on the situation and see what was going on there.
Okay.
My older brother had been tending to her for 4.5 years in her home. And when I went to visit, I decided that it was time for me to step up and offer to tend to her, give my brother a break, which he needed, because home care for the elderly can be very challenging. And if you don't keep life in balance along that route, it can tap you out.
Was she suffering at that time from anything other than just old age, or was she experiencing illness or dementia?
Well, she was 95 years old at that point.
Yeah.
So there were some physical liabilities, primarily with walking. Mm-hmm. All in all, she was in fairly good health for her age. Mm-hmm. There was dementia, although I really didn't understand the gravity of how that was affecting her thinking. Mm-hmm. And so I finished out the season at work. And
in North Carolina.
In North Carolina.
Right.
Packed up my belongings, got rid of everything because I didn't know how long I'd be in Arizona. I knew it was a life change. And I also knew it was the right thing for me to do for the right reasons. Mm. So I didn't have any compulsions about that. I didn't struggle with that.
With the decision.
With the decision. Yeah. I waited until one of my grandchildren was born in Greensboro, North Carolina, because I didn't want to miss that, and I didn't know when I'd be coming back east. Mm-hmm. But once that child was born, then I drove across the country to Mesa, packed up whatever I could in my car, and drove across and arrived in Mesa and did my best to settle in.
So when you were making this decision to leave North Carolina and spend an undetermined amount of time in Arizona, how did your children respond to that?
Well, Brant,
Dad was going to be gone. Right?
It's true.
Yeah.
And there were young grandkids in the field. Mm-hmm. And for any grandparent, that's always a tough thing to choose, is to move away from that.
Right.
However, I talked to each of my 4 children individually and told them what I was planning to do and why. And the most important thing that played into my decision is that they all gave me their unconditional support.
Wonderful.
And their love. And it would have been far different if I hadn't had that. And so the only thing that comes out is gratefulness for them in my life.
Yeah.
Because that's a certain encouragement that you can't buy at Sears.
Yeah.
It's that special.
It's almost like your children gave you their blessing and sent you forth as an emissary of sorts, almost like a worker in the field to go do something really great that represented the best of the whole family.
Yes. Well, it's the ties that bind, that blood. And my children all have a very big love for my mom. And so, yes, that encouragement was about as special as it gets. And that gave me strengthened my will to succeed. I didn't know if I would or not. I don't know if I have or not. But
I think you have, sir.
Okay. But it gave me that unsurpassed willingness to put everything I have into it.
And you referred to one of the challenges, I think, for caregivers is you didn't know how long you'd be gone. It's hard to plan because you're talking about a life that you don't know when it'll end. You know, you could be out there for a year, you could be out there for 5 years with a 95-year-old.
Yes.
I mean, you could be out there for 10 years. You don't know. And it's a moving target because people are living much longer. So it's the first great uncertainty of being a caregiver is how long will I be in this role?
Well, that's very true, Brant. And I think that, once again, I was sure that I was making the right decision, and I was okay with not knowing what the parameters to that decision were going to be. I think one of the difficult things about being out there at first for the first 2 months, my mother did not recognize me as her son.
Wow.
And this is living with her 24 hours a day. I wasn't fully aware of that until my brother indicated to me that that was the case.
That she didn't recognize you.
That she didn't recognize me. And maybe after I'd go to bed, she'd say something like,
who was that guy?
Who is this man in our house?
Wow.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's gotta, I mean, that's just, what do you do with that? You know, where's a shelf to put that on? I had this similar experience. My mom's 92, and she sent me a Christmas card and misspelled my name twice. And then just recently, she called me by the dog's name. Can you bring me coffee, Henry? And I said, Mom, I'm Brant. And she said, okay, well, thank you, Henry.
Maybe there's some sort of similarity in her mind.
And it's like, did you just kind of laugh that off, or how did you feel about not being recognized by your own mother?
Well, of course I was taken aback. Because I think, you know, we'd had so many phone conversations that I just assumed there was a connection, you know, a valid connection between us. But once I had a moment to think about it, I just I took a different tack. I said, okay, we're going to talk about memories that only I can have.
Yeah. Or share, you mean only that you can have, or shared memories that the two of you had together?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. But memories that from my childhood that only she and I would know.
I understand.
And a lot of pictures.
Yeah.
A lot of reinforcement. One of the other main things, and it was my goal going out there, was to take control of the diet in that household.
The diet?
The diet, yep.
Okay.
And
what had gone wrong with the diet? Or what was different about the diet that you wanted to change?
More healthful foods.
Okay.
A wider variety.
Okay.
Tastier cooking.
Are you a person who pays a lot of attention to organic foods? And
no,
I was going to say, because you look like Keith Richards. I mean, you know,
thanks. I have a face for radio. That's what you're saying.
Something didn't go right with your organic food plan.
You know, Brant, there's so much that I like about you, and comments like that aren't
helpful. Just don't throw fruit at me.
But so that was.
But
one
if you
thing.
do throw fruit, throw an organic fruit, please.
That's right.
Okay.
But that and water, ingesting more water in it, because I thought that
yeah.
I know there's a correlation between the diet and the thinking process.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I understood the status of my mother's thinking, I really wanted to make a concerted effort to improve the diet.
Did you see a change after you?
I did.
Okay.
I did, yes.
How long did it take before you started noticing differences?
Oh, probably about the same 2-month period, because I did the shopping, I did the cooking, I did the cleaning, pretty much everything in the household.
These were things that your older brother had been doing, yes?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And you parachute in.
Yep.
You're the younger brother.
Correct.
How did that work? Or did it?
That was a tricky dynamic. It really was. Our original intention was for my brother to have the opportunity to live in his own place.
Okay. Move out of your mom's.
Correct.
And go, okay.
Yeah.
And have a life.
And once I arrived out there had been a decision that would not happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that really changed the sense of the household. In retrospect, I don't think it was a bad thing, but
That he stayed?
That he stayed.
Okay.
But in any living situation, especially with people that are family,
Mm-hmm.
It can take some time for things to settle out.
So, our siblings may be listening to this show, so we can be a little bit careful what we say. But I'll just say that my relationship with my siblings, and I have 5, were testy and have been over the years. How would you describe yours? And did you have others? Was it just the brother, or do you have any others?
It was just that brother.
Do you have any other siblings?
I hadn't. The eldest brother passed away so many years ago.
Yeah, I lost my older brother too in '92.
So yes,
it's just the two of you then.
Correct.
Okay.
And yes, there were some testy moments.
Historically, did you guys get along, or did you?
We've always lived very far apart.
Okay.
We've stayed in touch over the phone, but living together is, as you know,
whole new ball game.
Whole new ball game.
Oh yeah.
But the three of us found a way to coexist. There was a day that my mother recognized that, yes, I was her son. And so the caregiving got easier at that point.
Why?
Because there was a trust, a trust that
this is my son.
This is my son, and he has my best interest at heart.
I see.
Because I emphasize that,
Yeah.
This is why I'm here, is to do all I can to make your sunset days as best as I can. That was always my goal. Always my goal. And Brant, once you get to a point like that, a lot of your own personal wishes just don't seem to matter as much anymore. And so we existed along those lines, and things were pretty good. There was someone that came to the house 3 days a week for maybe an hour or two to help out around. An elder care assistant, or whatever the term would be. I think one of the things we didn't realize that was really a challenge for us is that particular set of service personnel, especially in an environment like Mesa, Arizona, where there are so many retirees, is really tricky business. There just aren't enough qualified caregivers to fit that market.
Well, this is a huge problem. Yeah. I mean, there's a shortage of caregivers already, and then if we build walls, we'll keep out, sorry for the political statement, but we need more people coming in to care for our aged population.
We really do.
There's a massive labor shortage, and it's not just warm bodies. I mean, it's somebody who has an aptitude for taking care of an older person.
Absolutely right.
It's a rare skill.
Yes, and we struggled with the fact that with the company that we had aligned to provide that service, that company was not always able to provide consistently the same personnel.
Oh, you had a rotating door.
To a certain extent.
Ah.
And when you're talking about a caregiver providing personal attention to another human being, and it's a different person every week or 2 or 3, doesn't matter.
I had no idea. Yeah, we have the same nurse coming in for my mom, and they have a relationship.
That's fortunate.
Yeah.
That's what it takes. But when you have, an elderly person with dementia that is having to deal in personal situations with somebody they haven't met before, that's tough.
Yeah.
That's really tough.
Yeah.
So there were certain aspects of my mother's care that she was not willing to allow a caregiver to provide.
I want to go back to something you said a moment ago about you were willing to put aside your own interests and ambitions and cares, and even your own life agenda. You know, your career, your children were back east. There were so many things that you just put on the back burner for an undetermined amount of time. It was an act of self-sacrifice. Do you think that ability is a function of the individual person's personality and their values, their character? Do you think it's a function of time in saddle? I mean, I can do it for a year or 3, but maybe not 5 or 10 because I burn out. What was your experience kind of processing that ability to put aside your own interests for the care of another?
Brant, in this particular instance, I don't think I really put it in the context of self-sacrifice. I put it in the context of, this is my mother, whom I love dearly, who's lived an extraordinary life, and she had faced a lot of hardship. My mother went to night school.
Well, she was a Depression-era person.
Yeah.
For one thing, at 95, she lived through the Depression.
She went to night school and summer school for 17 years to get her bachelor's degree and master's while she held down a teaching job. So many extraordinary aspects to her life that it was something that I didn't feel I needed to do. I did need to do it, and I changed that. I didn't need to do it, but I wanted to do it. And I think that went a long way into helping me be cohesive in my own thinking about the process, what I was facing, and what it was going to be like. In actuality, it was different. It was far more taxing. And so I understood within 4 months or so that I needed to find a way to keep my life in balance. And so I began taking my camera out in the desert, going to regional and state parks all around Phoenix, and walking, getting quiet, and focusing on my photography.
And when did the bottles of tequila figure in?
Well, they were hidden along the path. Well, that was...
Mom, I'm taking a break for a little bit. I'll be back in a few hours or days.
You know, it's fairly round-the-clock care. So you're not often have the leisure to relax, if you will, in that kind of way. I just spent time... I'd go walking in the desert, learn to love the desert. And so, as time wore on, my mother's dementia intensified. Her ability to walk became more challenging. When I first moved out there, the only place for me in the house was in the den that was off the living room, which was in direct line of where she sat most of the day. And I didn't necessarily feel a great amount of privacy ever.
Did you have your own room?
It was the den.
Oh, the den was your room.
The den was my room.
So your mom, when your mom would go sit in her chair, she could see right into your private space.
Yeah. Or as soon as I opened the door, there was my mom.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
There did come a time when her ability to walk became tougher.
Yeah.
That she could no longer make it to her own room in her own bathroom at the back of the house. And so we swapped. And I moved to her room, and she came to the den, which was close to her chair.
Give me some sense of the time from the day you left North Carolina until she passed and you came back, was it over a year? How long was it?
It was 50 weeks. 50 weeks,
almost a year.
Almost a year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you first
before to the time that she passed, and I remained in Mesa for about 7 months after that to tend to property business and business for business purposes and that kind of thing.
So over a year and a half that you were
away
there,
from North Carolina,
away
yes,
from North Carolina. Let's talk about some of the personal things that and I think these have their own dynamic if it's a son taking care of a mother as opposed to a daughter taking care of her. Bathing.
Oh my
Did she have incontinence? Did she experience that?
Yes. Bathing, it was our goal to have the female
nurse bathe her.
Yeah. And there came a point when my mother was unwilling to get into the shower.
Mm-hmm.
And we went so far as to buy a bench seat where you can sit on the outside of the shower, slide over inside of the shower, and be bathed.
Okay.
My mother tried that once and decided that she would not try it again.
Okay.
The issues that occurred from an inability for her to be properly bathed were urinary tract infections.
I see.
And with the elderly, although I'm not a medical person at all, it was very easy to see when a urinary tract infection might be in play, because my mother's thinking...
Easy to see or easy to smell?
Easy to see, easy to hear, because my mother's thinking would go right off the charts.
You mean the urinary infection was affecting her mind,
absolutely,
her brain?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
And because she'd talk fairly nonsense, her sentence structure and things that she was trying to convey would just not add up.
Wow.
And that would be one of the clues. And yes, there is an odor associated with that, especially with incontinence.
That's the one I detected in our house. I asked our nurse, and she says she's not drinking enough water because it was really...
That's always the case.
Odoriferous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Water is so critically important.
Yeah.
And so we would have to treat that.
But your first indicator was something in her behavior.
Yes.
What would you see that would tell you that she wasn't getting enough fluid in her behavior?
One of the daily goals from the onset was to keep putting water in front of her, or juice, or flavored water, or whatever. Just keep tossing those liquids down. At the same time, because walking, even with a walker, was so difficult, she was hesitant to drink too much water because it may be hard for her to get to the bathroom.
I totally get that.
So
my mom will not drink because she says, well, then I'll just have to go pee.
Exactly.
And more, she's not making it to the toilet on time. And so she's soaking up a Depends. And then it leaks out and it embarrasses her.
Sure it does. As it would any of us.
Did your mom have that? Did you sense in her that in that 95-year-old body there was still a 30-year-old woman who was frustrated by what was happening with her body? The incontinence, the inability to walk, even maybe the dementia. Did she have a sense that, wow, my package is failing?
She did. And I could sense that. However, it was not something she openly dwelled on. And I don't know whether that had to do with pride or what. But it's not something that we spoke about a lot.
Well, it's kind of like, what can you really do about it?
Right.
I mean, your package and mine is failing too. Maybe mine faster than yours. But I mean, what can you do? You can eat well and exercise, but at the end of the day, you're not going to stop the aging process.
No. And I think she had a certain acceptance about that.
Yeah.
And so at that point, as far as I was concerned, it was making as many moments in the day as good as they can be.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And keeping a sense of well-being for whatever that would look like. Even if it wasn't well-being, trying to keep that sense. I mean, I'll pick up flowers and bring them,
nice.
Just whatever is going to brighten it up, encourage her to come sit outside and watch planes go by in the Phoenix sky.
Nice.
Just things like that.
Yeah.
When I'd go out to the desert and take photos, I'd bring them back and show them to her and talk about where I'd been and what I saw.
Well, you made some beautiful memories in that year.
We did. We really did.
That's nice. No, I wanted to dig in a little bit more deeply on two things. And they're both pretty personal, so if you don't want to talk about them, that's really okay.
I'll just say that if my comments have an opportunity to benefit one other person in this regard, I'm good with it.
Well, I have a vast audience, so it's going to benefit at least 10 other people.
Good.
I wanted to dig in a little bit more about the hygiene part, okay? Because, it's your mom, right? And you've spent your entire life, and you're now in your 60s. I am too. You spent your whole life not only not, exposing yourself to your mom's nakedness, but not even thinking about your mom's nakedness. And all of a sudden you got to deal with your mom's nakedness. How do you deal with that?
Well,
with difficulty.
It's true. Part of it boils down to an absolute need. It was something that had to be done, and it had to be done by me and or my brother. And at that point, you have to accept that. You can't deny it. It has to be done. I think it moves to a zone of an unconditional love for that human being, whether she was my mother or not.
That transcends your kind of moral reticence.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I learned to love my mother in a completely new way. And in retrospect, I just have to cherish that. That's what I have to walk away with.
Did your mom care? Did she?
Very interesting question. Go ahead if you'd like to finish.
Well, no, it's it. Did she have any level of embarrassment or reticence to have you help her with those things?
For the most part, I think she looked at it and we looked at it as what needed to be done. Okay, simply.
Yeah.
We have to do
So
this.
it's just a pragmatic approach to it.
Exactly. However, towards the end of her life, there were at least 2 instances where she recognized that it was her sons that were providing her this care. And at that point, I think that was very hard for her to accept. And if I think of all the things she may have thought towards the end of her life, those thoughts may have been some of the ones that contributed to her acceptance that maybe she didn't want to continue with this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm thinking that when she was maybe in her heart of hearts, was doing an inventory of the pros of living versus the cons, and the pros of dying versus the cons, that she said, this is a con. This is a disadvantage that my sons are having to care for me. And that I hear that from my own mom too. She frequently says, and as a matter of fact, on the list of things that trouble her, being a burden to her family is one of the top.
That's a very perceptive way to understand it, Brant. Yeah, I think you succinctly put it in good terms.
So I have another kind of deeply personal question. So in the end, she got this urinary tract infection, and it basically was her undoing.
Yes.
Right. And that you could make a case that the infection was the result of not proper hydration or hygiene.
Correct.
Which was your responsibility.
Yes.
How did you deal with that?
Well, it was I dealt with it relationally. My goal had always been...
I might not put that on the tape. That's a deeply personal question. That's almost a question. That's almost a judgmental question. You were responsible and you failed. That's not okay.
Well, let me address it.
Okay.
Since you've asked it,
All
and you
right.
can decide whether you want to leave it in or not. That experience was entirely relational. Me and my mom.
Yeah.
My goal going out there was to give her the very best care I could.
Yeah.
I know my own limits as a human being. And I know that I did everything that I could. There were some things that were in my control and some things that were outside of my control. And those that were outside, I let go.
Good for you.
So I don't carry any remorse about other things that I could have done, or I don't dwell at all on the
So you're
fact.
not playing the tapes I woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Not at all.
Those don't play.
No.
Good for you.
Because in truth, what I came away with from this experience was a profound thankfulness for the opportunity to experience every moment of it.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
And there will be one final story that I want to share that was probably one of my best memories, but I'll leave it up to you to tell me when to share
No,
that.
I want to hear it.
Okay. There came a time when there was another UTI, urinary tract infection. And we weren't able to get my mother into a car to take her to the emergency room. And so we needed to call an ambulance. And we did go to the hospital. And it didn't seem like, from that point on, she did not come home after that point. They didn't seem to be able to get on top of her infections, even though she had just suffered from one previously at the same hospital. People didn't talk to each other to focus on that kind of thing. And her infections got worse. And that, I don't know how much mind at that point was really there. We struggled with the hospital and the insurance company to get her a release to leave the hospital, either to an assisted living facility
Or hospice.
or
maybe.
hospice
Mhm.
at the house.
Okay.
My preference was that she come home.
Right.
My brother and I didn't agree.
Mm.
Finally, she was released to an assisted living facility right nearby, and we would spend a lot of time there. And that was a very difficult place to be for me, straight up. I did not like that kind of facility. I didn't like the attention.
Was there a reason why you didn't like it?
Impersonal.
Was it clinical and
It wasn't.
not beautiful? Or
There were interior decor things that were done to try to warm the place up, but that was a solitary room with very little interaction aside from my brother and I taking shifts, if you will, going to spend time with her. And there was a sense, I think, that we all had that, and even my mother, I think at that point, she was just kind of, I'm tired.
she was ready to go?
She was.
Yeah.
But a year or two before, my daughter had given my mother a book of fables from India.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would take that book in and sit and read these fables.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I would use my most expressive theatric
which you're good at,
style with appropriate pauses. And we would read these fables.
Very nice.
And every once in a while, I'd stop, I'd pause, and I'd look at my mother, and she'd look at me, and she'd go, oh, just...
She was getting it.
She was getting it.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And aside from whatever could have been going on in my mind at that time, and whatever could have been going on in her mind at that time, for that moment, for those moments, we were in sync.
And it went deeper.
It did. It did.
Than the words even. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it wasn't too many more days after that that she passed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that one of my most endearing memories of that whole year was that time reading fables.
Wow. Beautiful. Dale, that's a great place to end. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
I want to take a moment to talk about what it means to be a gentleman. We men are getting a lot of confusing messages nowadays. We see powerful, rich men behaving badly, and we think, maybe that's what I need to do to get ahead. But I urge you, my brothers, to consider an alternative male role model. By worldly measures, Dale is not rich. He lays tile and works part-time at Lowe's. By worldly measures, he is not powerful. He is truly humble and only agreed to this interview because he believes it will help. But Dale has proved himself to be one of the richest, most powerful people I know. He is a man of integrity, of honor, and of love. Dale is a true gentleman, and I can see why he is beloved by so many, including me. Something to think about. Dale briefly mentioned that he is a photographer, and I'm happy to tell you that he's put together a collection of his favorite pictures just for Dance Past Sunset listeners. It's available for free from dancepastsunset.com. Just look in the show notes, and you'll find a link there to download the collection. Plus, it'll sign you up for my newsletter, which I send out a few times a year to announce new shows and programs, things I think are helpful to caregivers. Dale's photos are gorgeous, so you're going to want to check that out for sure. Well, that's it for now. You could do me a huge favor by taking a moment to like this show on iTunes and share it with your friends. If you are a caregiver, have been a caregiver, or expect to be one day, then we need inspiring stories like Dale's so that we are strong, skilled, and able to do our very best. I hope to continue to bring you those stories, but I need to hear from you, so please get in touch via Facebook or Twitter. Thanks. Coming up next time on Dance Past Sunset is the story of a boomer who took an unusual route to his sunset years by moving outside the U.S., where he and his wife work and live a high-quality life for a fraction of the cost of living in the U.S. The show is loaded with good information about international living, so you won't want to miss my next show. Until then, my muchachos and muchachettes, make the most of every moment, because it's the only moment you've got. This is your host, Brant Huddleston, signing off.